was hoping for attention.
You did it. Huh?
Oh, I want a military attention.
Hand hut!
There we go. Alrighty, welcome everybody to Brown Bag Lunch. It's nice to see you as usual. Have cards going around. I think I saw them. Good. We have lots of birthdays. Darlene Wells, Nancy Johnson, Bruce Sheets, and Kendra Beck. Oh, we should have sang happy birthday to Nancy Johnson.
Oh, you don't need to, Lily.
Although it was a big one. It was a big one, she said, so we do need to. And then there's a happy anniversary card for the Stimmels, right? Okay. So Alice is filling in for Anne, who is mending her bones.
And how old are you?
Me?
Yeah.
39.
Yeah.
What's the big say I'm getting Medicare run for its money right now?
Another name to our wall back there. Okay, I forgot a very important announcement last week, so I want to be sure that everybody knows, this is from Shirley Brandon, that the First United Methodist Church is having its Christmas tea, which is always delightful, Wednesday, December 4th. And it's from 10:30 to 11. There'll be coffee and goodies. And from 11 to 2, there'll be soup, sandwiches, and desserts. And everybody's welcome, and it'll be a free will offering. So please let Shirley Brandon know that we did this, because I was in big trouble last week. Okay. But that's a very, very nice event. So hopefully we can all do that. I think our only announcement for today is that the holiday soup supper and cookie walk is coming right up. It's December 10th, which is right around the corner. It will be right here in this room from 4:30 to 6:30. $12 will be the price, and there'll be 4 homemade soups. And I think the rumor is that there's always chili, chicken noodle soup, Jack's beef and barley soup, and I think that this year, once again, the specialty soup is going to be homemade oyster stew. So some people will think that's really wonderful, and some people think that's really awful, and there will be nobody in between. So anyway, that's the way. And there will be a silent auction, and if any of you happen to peek in the door when it was open, it's a beautiful, already, holiday silent auction thing.
Thanks to Jerry.
Yes, a lot of them thanks to Jerry.
Yes.
Okay, and so once again, that's Tuesday, December 10th. So the homemade cookies and the homemade candies, if you remember, are for sale by the pound. They'll be back in what we call our cookie room, and that sale will start right after Brown Bag Lunch at 1 o'clock. Okay. Brown Bag Lunch for next week, November 26th. At quadruple his normal rate, Don Wentworth is going to do his Thanksgiving holiday Brown Bag Lunch, with a lot of facts and things about holidays, about Thanksgiving holiday and the days past. Okay, and so today our Brown Bag Lunch is going to be about Bellevue and the Bellevue piano companies, because I'm beginning to realize that there was more than one. And we have Bellevue people here today, for which I'm really glad, because we have errors and we need corrections. That's what Brown Bag Lunch is for, to gather information. So, get my pencil so I can write down those things. Okay, so it all started, we think, in April of 1905, very long time ago. A man by the name of Professor Paul Cerruti, a piano tuner from Pittsburgh. Okay, he'd been coming to Bellevue for over 10 years, And he had finally raised enough capital that he could begin manufacturing a limited number of pianos in a commercial hotel, which was in Bellevue. And he had leased that hotel for a couple of years and started building pianos. Soon, however, his Bellevue Piano Company, the Bellevue Piano Company, decided to erect a brand new building at the south end of the property at 908 North Riverview. And formerly, it was the Grandview Park, is what I read. Does that sound right? The Grandview Park, long time ago. Okay, the building that he made faced east and west. It was to be a 2-story brick-built structure with a basement, measuring 40 by 80, and it would cost $5,000. There it is. It is $5,000. William Hancock, contractor from Macoka, received a contract and built the building. It was wired for electric lights, and it had steam heat. So this is another view of the piano factory. This newspaper, this came from the newspaper. I'm missing a picture. Sorry, I'm missing one. It showed piano company employees standing in front of a fence in front of this large brick piano factory, but you see the factory right there. 50,000 square feet is what they advertise. And it was built at the turn of the century, and this piano company was Bellevue's leading industry. And through the years, it was really quite remarkable the things that happened there. And I can see I'm looking at all of this and trying to put the pieces together, all of this. So the piano company was sort of Bellevue's Clinton engine. It was their big industry, it brought lots of people to town to work, and it really did great things for the city of Bellevue. I know the clicker doesn't work. Okay, so we see the outside of the piano company, and this is, of course, inside. And in 1910, the company began advertising a very new instrument. They'd already been making pianos, and I never think of a piano as an instrument, a musical instrument, but I guess it is. I just never think of it that way. So when all these newspaper articles call it an instrument, I'm like, oh. So in addition to the high-grade pianos that the Bellevue Piano Company was already making, they started advertising and making something called the Gossman piano. And it was named after the superintendent of the Bellevue Piano Factory. And it was to fill a demand for a first-class piano that could be available at a moderate price. And the price was $200. The medium-sized cases, so it wasn't a huge piano, it was a medium-sized piano, and the cases were made out of beautiful San Domingo mahogany. They were artistically designed, and they had beautiful hand carvings. The mechanism consisted of a full plate, bushed tuning pins, full copper bass strings of imported steel wire, and the latest improved noiseless trap works, which were mouse-proof. And back then, I think that was probably very important. Okay, they were mouse-proof. It had 3 artistic nickel-plated pedals, genuine ivory keys, standard repeating brass flange actions, causing the touch to be very responsive and pleasing to the player. The soundboard was scientifically crowned so as to give it almost a violin effect. And in fact, every part of the Gossman piano was to be the very best, to fill a need and add to their rapidly growing, increasing business. And it did just that for them. They made many, many, many of them. But on August 21st of 1919, the Bellevue Piano Company changed. It was purchased by a man by the name of H.G. Johnson. And the reason Johnson, and he wrote many articles about this, the reason Johnson chose Bellevue to build his pianos was because of course, cheap shipping rates, right? Both for receiving his raw ingredients and sending out his finished product. It was the westernmost plant to produce pianos, the only plant across the Mississippi that was making pianos. And he wanted everybody to know that it was not by chance that he came to Bellevue, but it was after a lot of study. He felt, after all his study, that Bellevue was located in at that time, the population center of the nation. Then that center was, of course, continuing to move westward. But he could, from Bellevue, he could easily ship to the east, and he could easily ship to the west. And to him, that was very important. The other reason that he really liked Bellevue for his business was that he thought that it was a great advantage to be on the west bank of the river. And I thought, well, that was quite interesting. Why would that be? But he said that the advantage was that his rates could be less, allowing him to make an excellent product and sell it more reasonably. His pianos were beautiful pieces of furniture, and nearly all the lumber used in their manufacture, he said, came from Oregon and Washington. And I thought that was kind of surprising too, because Jackson County had beautiful hardwoods. We had wonderful hardwoods, but he imported all of his wood from Oregon and Washington. So having the Mississippi River was a big advantage, and of course the railroads that came in. He also felt that it was his advantage on the west side of the river to be away from large manufacturing centers, because his labor turnover was low. Practically all of his employees owned their own houses, and they looked at Bellevue as, and these were his words, as their final resting place. They were happy in Bellevue, they were content in their environment, and it gave him a peace of mind, and in his thinking, it showed in the quality of work that they turned out. And again, I see a lot of parallels between Johnson's thinking and that of Don Thomas when he came to Jackson County. He was looking for work ethic. He was looking for people that knew how to get things done, people who showed up for work, people that he could depend on, people that took pride in their work, and neither of these men found that in very many places, but here they did. And I think that's the big reason that both of them came our way. So, by December 2nd of 1919, the Excelsior Record was reporting that Mr. Johnson was increasing the size of his operation, which it had set idle for kind of a time, from the time that the professor left until he came. But he began by breathing life back into the operation. And the commercial club that they had started out with had decided to finance him to the tune of $3,500 if he agreed to stay for 1 year. And if he stayed for that 1 year, the Kelsos of Bellevue would put in an equal amount of money, and he added $11,000 of his own personal funds. And so during that time, he made a lot of improvements to the original factory. He installed much new machinery, and his goal was to manufacture 100 pianos a month. And in October of 1919, there were 35 employees working there, and he foresaw that his workforce was going to double. So there was an article in the Bellevue Herald talking about how wonderfully he kept these promises, and that he did everything that he was supposed to do for the commercial club, and he, because they must have still owned the property is what I'm thinking. He owned the business, they owned the property. And at any rate, they were now considered to be a permanent fixture in Bellevue, and he had even paid Kelso a year's rent in advance. And so he was doing really, really well. Another article in the Excelsior newspaper of November 21st, 1919 reported that the Johnson Piano Company could not get enough housing in their city for their workmen. And so, a little bit like Clinton Engine, right? And so they were looking to expand their business and maybe open a branch factory in Maquoketa. And the city fathers in Maquoketa, according to the Maquoketa papers, were frantically looking for space, hoping that they could maybe fix up the old woolen mill or an old packing plant or something, so that they could get that new business to come, to have a branch in Maquoketa. They knew that the man in charge, Mr. Johnson, was a hustler from the word go, that he kept things moving, that he was going to be a big success, and so every effort should be made to bring him to Maquoketa. But I don't see any evidence that this ever happened. I don't think they did ever open anything in Maquoketa. But it's interesting because when Clinton Engine opened Maquoketa, remember we ended up with 2 new housing developments because they didn't have housing for all the people that moved in there. And Bellevue was having the same problem of not enough housing as people came in to work at the piano factory. So this is a photo that, just one of my favorites, the old Bellevue Piano Company, and we actually don't know the year of this picture, and we don't know which of the Bellevue piano companies it was. Was it before Johnson? Was it after Johnson? We don't really know. But it's just such a wonderful old picture. And they had so many different types of pianos, and these different styles of cases and that sort of thing, and they were really, really beautiful. So, June 6th of 1921, there were headlines in the Jackson Sentinel that Bellevue may have $1 million factory. The venture was announced and said to be the greatest development in the history of Bellevue. And this was to be the building of a new piano factory, and the name would now be changed, and it would be H.G. Johnson Piano Manufacturing Company. The plant was to be extended to 600 foot long, but I've also seen 800 foot long, and 80 foot wide, and it was all to be on a ground floor. The working space was all to be on a ground level. It had a high working basement in addition, and so it made the total square footage 96,000 feet. But the layout was going to be something really different than what you saw in factories for the most part. It was a very progressive setup, and the goal would be to push the product from one end of the factory to another with no backward movement. So everything, just almost like an assembly line, everything could just keep going and they didn't have to backtrip. Everything on the same floor, and it had not been that way before. Efficiency throughout, and they fully expected that they would eventually have a turnout of 12,500 pianos a year. That's a lot of pianos. And that would give the Bellevue factory national ranking as far as piano factories went. So this is so you see Mary Weck's name there. This is a gold certificate. She had bought stock in the Henry G. Johnson Piano Manufacturing Company. So this is a photo, and I need lots of help from Bellevue people because we know we have things wrong, so we need the correct information. But looking at this slide, I think, wrong slide. Okay, so it was a very long, stretched out building that this went along. So if we look at the next picture, okay, that shows it from a different angle, and I believe that the 2-story brick building on this side was the original piano factory? No?
What did you say?
So I'm asking, is this 2-story brick building on this side, is that the original piano factory? Okay, so that's the original. The $1 million one must be the one going that direction. Okay. So we have a letter that was written by Jessie Neiman from Bellevue. Jessie Neiman? And she talked about this arrangement that you see here. I think there's one more picture. So you can see the Mississippi, and it was just very strategically located. So this is according to Jessie. She said there were 3 buildings, and it covered a city block in North Bellevue, and pretty much on the river. The northernmost building, she said, was the mill room. The southernmost was the assembly area, and the old 2-story building that we looked at was where player actions were built and everything and put together. Then she said that the old building also served as the office building, and the basement at that time was used for storage. According to her, overall at that time, over 200 people were employed. Girls and young women built the player actions for the pianos because their fingers were more dexterous. Men worked in the basement where the cabinetry was built for these beautiful pianos, instruments, and the soundboards were installed. And the soundboard, she said, came from somewhere in Illinois. The mill room was where the lumber was cut to size and seasoned, and the pianos were very carefully constructed and finished. They really were a work of art. They were beautiful. Excuse me. Since the Chicago-Milwaukee Railroad ran through the center of town, a spur went down the west side of the factory to the loading platform, and it was easy for them to ship pianos all over the United States. They could ship to the north, they could ship to the south. And they said that customers even bought carloads of pianos. That's a lot of pianos. Of course, pianos are big, but that's a lot of pianos. So, in January, and this is my most amazing fact when I give tours at the other building. In January of 1922, the H.G. Johnson Piano Manufacturing Company sold a record number of 333 player pianos in one day. That's amazing. The player pianos that they made were relatively small. They were 53 inches high. And by 1922, orders were coming in so fast for these special player pianos that they had to employ a night force for the first time, a night shift, and they again had to have some building expansions. So the company was still going strong in 1924, and then both a financial and an economic disaster struck, because about 9:30 in the evening, early June, workmen who were loading a railroad car full of pianos discovered a fire in the spraying department, and they turned in the alarm. The night watchman and the superintendent had just walked through that department, and everything seemed fine, but by the time they reached the front of the building, there was a large explosion. The fire department and most of Bellevue, the paper said, quickly arrived on the scene, but owing to the highly combustible nature of the contents of the area, the fire was rapidly gaining headway. There were barrels of varnish, gasoline, turpentine, and alcohol, and these barrels would be hurled into the air as they exploded, and the shock shook the whole town, and the flames spread like lightning. The Bellevue Herald said that firemen worked like beavers most of the night, and they managed to save about 1/3 of the factory building, which was literally packed with modern, expensive machinery. One fireman reported that if the whole Mississippi River had been poured on the fire, they could not have contained the fire to a smaller area. So it was a pretty devastating fire. The loss was estimated at $200,000, putting 175 to 200 people out of work. The payroll loss was $3,000 per week, and they hoped that with the support of the community, they could rebuild, and they did. The insurance on the whole plant was $299,000, and on the building itself, the burned building, the burned part of the building, $187,000. And that insurance was carried by 7 different companies, and everything was assigned to the Bellevue State Bank as trustee. So after the dust settled, the smoke settled, the ashes settled, whatever, if Johnson felt unable to resume, the bondholders were going to be able to be repaid in full. But if he decided to rebuild and continue, then a liberal adjustment of the loss would allow him to do that. So everybody waited for him to make a decision. Well, Johnson felt in his mind that the settlement was fair, and after a discussion with the commercial club that must have still owned the land, he offered to stay in Bellevue and continue if he would sell $80,000 worth of bonds to help him rebuild and keep going. If not, he said he would liquidate. So in effect, what he did was, he said, therefore, it's up to the people of this community if they wish to retain this plant. And the people of Bellevue stepped up, and they did do it. They rebuilt the plant. So the kind of the next thing that we see happening is that Mr. Johnson was so impressed by the help that he got from the citizens of Bellevue that he hosted a grand Halloween reception and dance on October 31st. And this is an advertisement from the Bellevue Herald. And the purpose was to celebrate the rebuilding of this magnificent Henry G. Johnson piano factory. And it was for appreciation in the manner in which the people of Bellevue stood by him in his time of trouble. However, in August of 1925, not very long after that, Johnson sold the company because of ill health. And he sold it to a large Eastern syndicate who again sold the piano company in less than a year. And this is maybe where we run into a little bit of trouble, so I need a lot of input. So the next thing we see are, these are stock certificates, as you can see, from the new business. The new owner was E.S. Rothworth of DeKalb, Illinois. He's said to have been a really modest individual, but someone who understood the piano business thoroughly. Edwin Raworth had been superintendent of a piano factory in Michigan in 1906, and by 1920, he was manufacturing his own pianos in DeKalb, Illinois. In May of 1926, the Raworth Grand Piano Company of Bellevue received its charter and then was authorized to transact business as a corporation in the state of Iowa. According to the Jackson Sentinel, owners of the gold bonds, which is the gold certificate that we saw earlier, could be turned in and they could receive stock in this company. So they would just go to Bellevue State Bank, exchange their holdings for a 7% preferred stock certificate in the new company. And so people did that. And you see these two certificates of E.L. Lampy. He owned stock in the old one, he traded it in for stock in the new company. And Raworth pianos were made in Bellevue, we think, between 1926 and 1929. And most of them were shipped to Chicago and sold in Chicago. Well, we, the Historical Society, didn't know very much about Raworth pianos until we got a letter from a lady by the name of Betty Raworth of Arlington, Texas, and she was looking for information about the Bellevue piano companies. And so she sent us this brochure. So this is the one side of a threefold brochure for the Raworth grand pianos. Oh, maybe I should say, we think that the Johnson Company may have only made player pianos. We don't see any evidence they made other kinds of pianos, but probably just player pianos. This company made baby grand pianos, so, you know, quite a difference. And this is the other half of the brochure, where you can see them advertising their pianos. They were $250, $260, and $275, $275, depending on the style that you got. They were made of mahogany, I believe, and they were very, very nice, beautiful pianos. This piano is the photograph that this Betty Raworth sent to us. And she said that she and her husband had found this piano on the internet. They purchased it on the internet, and they had it shipped from California to Texas, and were having it restored. And this is because he was a great-great-great-grandnephew of the owner. And so they were all excited to find this Raworth baby grand piano. According to the serial number, and this is her information, according to the serial number, it was one of the last pianos that Raworth made. And they have traced it from Bellevue to Chicago, Chicago to Texas, Texas to North Carolina, North Carolina to California. Sounds like a Marine family to me. That's kind of the directions I went. And then back to Texas again when they purchased it. But she remarked that it had to be an extremely well-made piano to having withstood all the elements and all the many miles of moving. Because I can tell you, movers are not very gentle. They're gentle when you're watching. They're not gentle when you're not. She sent another picture of a Raworth piano, but it doesn't look like a baby grand to me, so I don't know what the significance of that was. This was all in 2007, I believe, and she just did us a great service by what she sent. Anyway, in May of 1929, there was another devastating fire, and the company was destroyed, and they received $168,500 in insurance, $12,000 in salvage, and they were expecting to be in operation again by November if they rebuilt. But I see no signs that they rebuilt. I think at that time it came to an end. In the Maquoketa paper, the Jackson Sentinel, of April 17, 1931, they reported that the Johnson Piano Factory was being sold. It was on sale, for sale. Lee Stockham from Maquoketa attended the sale, and he saw the buildings and the grounds go to the Bellevue Holding Company for $2,160, and all of the machinery that was salvageable went to a Chicago firm for $5,200, and that was kind of the end. Later in January of 1936, so it looks like for 5 years maybe, the piano company just kind of sat there in a state of disrepair. Again, a little like Clinton Engine. The company was incorporated for, the company was then sold to the Rock Island Oil Heater Corporation, 1936. And that company was incorporated for $500,000 and employed 40 men. So it went from piano company to the Rock Island Oil Heater Company. Then later, maybe more in time periods that we're familiar with, it was owned by the Gibson Company. And C.M. Gibson was the founder and the president. I don't know if that's Charlie Gibson, who was the sheriff of Jackson County for a while. C.M. Gibson, does that ring any bells, any Bellevue bells? Okay, well, it was built by, or it was owned by C.M. Gibson at that time. They manufactured monitor aerator washing machines. And I think we do have one of those at the other museum. They were small apartment-sized washing machines. And then, during the war years, the Gibson Company, like Clinton Engine, was engaged in war production, and they employed 375 people. And it continued to expand in 1947 and 1950. There were expansions. When I say during the war effort, Clinton Engine, it would have been the Maquoketa Company at that time, because this factory site was built by the Maquoketa Company with the support of the federal government to support the war effort. And as you know, one of the most important things they made was the big sawmill. There are pictures of it upstairs that sawed huge blocks of steel that were needed for the war effort. So both of these companies were switched to manufacturing for the war so that we could survive and have what we needed for the war effort. But they continued to expand in 1947 and 1950. Somewhere along that line, maybe in 1973, which is quite a while longer, a company by the name of Linotronics, is that how you say it? A corporation from the Quad Cities came. They purchased the company in 1973, employing over 100 people, one of which is with us today, Karen Brown. Karen and Kevin Brown worked there for a while. I asked her what they did, and she said she didn't think we wanted to know.
We did outlook for Sears and Woods. We made a front wheel alignment, but it was too much like Bear's front wheel alignment, and we were taking the court for copyright infringements.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about.
Okay, did everybody hear that? Okay, louder. They meant something for Montgomery Ward and Sears. What did they mean?
We did outwork and then
Outwork.
our main for Sears and Woods and that.
Okay.
Our main product was a front wheel alignment.
Front wheel alignment they were doing, but then it was too much like someone else's.
There's one out there, I don't know if you're going that, called Bear, that's a front wheel alignment also.
Okay,
And our patent, there's no patent with
The patents were too much alike. There were lots of patent disputes. Certainly Clinton Engine had their share. So again, there's just some of the similarities between all of this and our growing pains in Macoka and Clinton Engine. Okay, so they were in business for a while. Unfortunately, they went bankrupt, maybe because of losing the lawsuit. They went bankrupt and left many people in Bellevue looking for jobs. The factory was then sold in 1975 to a man named Delbert Jackson. And, need help again here, he, I think, turned the northern section into a bowling alley. Okay, he made the bowling alley. It's still there today, very successful. And then he eventually sold that to Randy Weber. Okay. The middle section was made into apartments. And in 1980, Virgil Giesman bought the southern end for a feed store. I have to get approval over here because I know I have mistakes. They're nodding. In 1989, Joe Doherty bought the county-side feeds from Mr. Giesman. Countryside, okay. Countryside feeds from Mr. Giesman. And the Bellevue Manufacturing Company and other apartment buildings came along. And by 1995, the original piano factory building was owned by 5 separate individuals or businesses. So it was all chopped up and owned by different people. Again, I don't know whether that means the land or just the companies.
Just the company.
Just the companies.
We kept the building the way it was.
Okay.
The land underneath us.
Yeah. But
So did these companies purchase the land underneath it, or did they just own the business?
It all came together.
It all came together. Okay. Well, that's kind of the story of that as we know it. And I just have to say, sometimes change isn't for the better. Wouldn't it be nice if we still had a wonderful piano company going in Bellevue? That would just be wonderful. Or if there was a wonderful Clinton Engine company going in Clinton Engine, or even the Eagle Rolling Mills, or I guess I don't like change. One thing I would like to show you is that at the museum on the fairgrounds, we have 3 Bellevue pianos that we are very proud of. They're beautiful pieces of furniture, as you can see here. The styles and the handcrafted woodworking is superior to almost anything that you can buy today, in my estimation. But it's difficult for us to know the dates that they were made, or even which of these companies made them. But this is one that we have over there. And then I can tell you the story in the little bit of time we have left of our wonderful Bellevue player piano. Okay, so I had not been here very long, and we were contacted by a lady by the name of Margaret Fisher of Lincoln, Nebraska. And at that time, she was connected with a business called the Dietz Music House in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska. Maybe she was a musical person, maybe she played for them, maybe she gave lessons for them, but she personally owned several different pianos, 3 player pianos, I believe. And some of them she had stored at this piano company. Well, she was being forced to downsize, and she contacted us and told us that she would like to donate her restored Bellevue piano to us if we would come and get it. So, Mitch and I drove to the middle of downtown Lincoln, Nebraska. And there we found, on the main drag, we found an old brick building, 3-story brick building. And on the 3rd floor, they took us up to the 3rd floor, and little wooden boards, and it was so warped that you almost got seasick walking across it, right? And it just kind of rolled, and it was very squeaky and quite interesting. But when you stopped looking at the floor and you looked up, there were hundreds of pianos, and I do mean hundreds, of every imaginable type of piano. And the most surprising thing to me was they were all stored on end. I never would have thought you could do that with a piano, but every one of them was stored on end. That's why they could get so many up there, I guess. So we found our piano with their help, and there were 5 big burly guys that brought all 700 pounds of that piano down this rickety metal freight elevator, kind of the kind you see in old mobster movies on TV, you know? And it was on a little dolly, and they wheeled it out to the loading dock, and we had borrowed Ron and Sherry Reed's brand new truck. Only had 1,400 miles on it, and they put it in the back of the truck, and then it was all ours. So we had taken moving blankets and things, so we wrapped it really well with all these moving blankets, and we secured it with bungee cords, and we had some web straps that kind with ratchet things on it. We thought we had it really well secured. Started out down the freeway to come back to Iowa, and found that we had to stop every 10 minutes because the wind would find its way in, no matter what we did, and that it would be flapping away, and oh my gosh. So I decided it was time for action. So we stopped at the first 7-Eleven we came to. We bought every roll of duct tape they had. And not on the piano itself, but on the blanket. We duct taped that thing until you couldn't believe it. We had to stop at another 7-Eleven a little further down and get a little more. But we duct taped it up, and finally we got it back here. And when we reached the museum, a lot of you will remember Bob Sears. He was president of the Historical Society at that time. He was there waiting for us. Jim Bowman was there, and another Jim, and I can't remember his last name. And so we tried to bring this into the museum. We had Jack Palmer's dolly, and I do remember we broke the wheels on that as we were bringing it in the middle of stock car races and a wedding reception going on next to Pearson Hall. We had a lot of challenges, but we got the rest in, and the rest is kind of history. There's a picture of it today. It's not well displayed today. It works beautifully. It has been electrified, so you know it works beautifully. We play it for people during the fair, or when we have groups of children going through. We have hundreds of piano rolls, and the one we leave on there all the time is Turkey in the Straw. And the reason that we leave that in there is because all the little kids like to dance to that, and so they really get going. But the old piano, they manufacture piano rolls today. But the piano rolls today are kind of like the cartoons of today. You watch them and one thing moves and everything is stationary. But if you watch an animated Disney thing from back in the day, everything's moving, butterflies and birds, and that's kind of the difference. Turkey in the Straw has all kinds of things going on in the music, and the ones of today, they just don't measure up. Anyway, we got it back. Now, we don't know how it got to Lincoln for sure, so long ago. Somewhere along the way, we know that the quarter-sawed white oak was painted black. It was lacquered black because that was the fashion of the time. So it's black lacquered. But if you close these doors, you can see that they forgot to lacquer the inside part, so you can see what it looked like originally. And Margaret told us that she was always going to restore it to its original finish, but she just never got it done. She did have the Clare Action rebuilt, and she had it electrified, so we can play it manually or electrically. And I guess in that picture that I moved the bench. The bench isn't there. The bench isn't original. But according to the Dietz Music House, where the piano was stored all this time, our piano is of the 1600 series. It was number 1620 to be exact, and they had it appraised at $2,500. This was in 2003 or 4 or something. According to their guide, and they use this Pierce Piano Atlas that you see here, 10th edition, according to that, it was manufactured in 1914 by Henry G. Johnson. But you can see, I tried to print for you here, something has to be wrong with that. Either 1914 was not the year because Johnson didn't own it then, or he owned it then and the year is different. But I don't know whether Johnson actually manufactured it, since he was the big piano player manufacturer, and they just have the date wrong or what, but he did not own this. This was the Bellevue Piano Company at that time, and down here when he owned it, they don't have it listed. So somehow, and maybe we'll never know the answer, but we're very proud to have our player piano. And I hope that next time you're at the museum, you will go see it and you will listen to it, and the next time you volunteer, learn to play it. It's very, very simple. And then when people come in, they can enjoy it. So, we know that property now, in what prompted this brown bag lunch about this piano company at this time is, evidently Meyer's elected, George Meyer? Mike Meyer, sorry. Mike Meyer called and he wanted information about the building and the piano companies and et cetera, et cetera. So we got the information ready for him. Hasn't come yet. But evidently Mike Meyer elected. They're not surprised. I'm sure he's a busy man. So, but Meyer Electric Company purchased the building this year. And what can you tell us about that? He purchased, not the bowling alley part.
Just the part that we owned, the south end.
The south end. Okay.
Anything that has a dock in front of it himself.
Okay, is what he purchased. Okay, and so he's gonna, I assume, move his electric company
Oh,
into there.
he was renting from us.
Oh, he was already there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
He had it filled up.
okay.
Filled up.
Filled up.
Filled up.
Okay. So that's what's there now. But the bowling alley is going strong, and I'm sure that you can go there at any time. So someday, when we have more time, we will talk about the history of our piano here. This is a very special piano that it wasn't given to us, they made it possible for us to have it. The Foster House of Music in the Quad Cities, Jim Foster, Verna Foster, their big music company in the Quad Cities. That was one of the last pianos that this very special piano company made. And so when we got that, we had a whole program about that piano and how special it was. And so we're really, really proud to have that. So that's just kind of the pianos that the Jackson County Historical Society has. Anybody have anything to add? Any history of Bellevue that we can correct as we go along? Any piano
I have
stories?
a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I heard correctly. Early on, you were talking about the materials used, wood coming from other states.
Yes.
Did you mention that the keys are ivory?
Yes.
What's the source of all that ivory for all those pianos?
Probably poaching elephants in Africa.
It would have been poaching.
Were there that many
Probably
elephants?
was poaching.
I mean, that's a lot of ivory.
That's a lot. I mean, but elephant tusks are also very, very large, but you're right. And piano keys are not ivory anymore, I understand. And so,
I did think you would know, but I thought, man, that's a lot of ivory.
that is a lot of ivory. No, you're absolutely right. But they were ivory. They used all ivory keys on their piano.
Yeah.
And they were very, very special pianos. So what a wonderful thing for Bellevue to have had such a fine company. But I think above all, what a tribute it is to the people of this area, Jackson County in this area, to have people of the caliber that companies want to come there and be there because they have such a good workforce of dependable, honest, hardworking people with the kind of work ethic that they're looking for. And that can't be said of every part of the country, even back then. So very, very special thing, special reason that these companies came to this area. So, all right, if no one has anything else to say, next week, Don Wentworth will be talking to us about old-fashioned Thanksgivings. So, thank you very much.